My name is Natalie Cordero. I'm 31 years old. The night before my wedding, in a private dining room at the Belmore Hotel, my father stood up with a glass of champagne in his hand and gave a toast that 53 people will never forget. He looked at my fiancé, Marcus, smiled the way he does when he's about to say something cruel and call it honesty, and said, "I always imagine Natalie with someone from our world, someone with a legacy. Marcus, you seem like a decent man, but let's be honest. My daughter married down. We all know it. But love is love, right?" He laughed. A few people laughed nervously with him. Most didn't. Marcus sat beside me, his hand frozen around his water glass. He didn't flinch. He didn't react. He just looked at me with the quietest sadness I've ever seen in another person's eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. Instead, I squeezed his hand under the tablecloth and said nothing. But what my father didn't know, what nobody in that room except Marcus and me knew, was that 4 days earlier, Marcus's company had been acquired by a tech conglomerate for $40 million. His name and net worth were printed on page 3 of the Wall Street Journal. And within 6 months, the man my father called a downgrade would be the wealthiest person anyone in our family had ever met. Before I tell you what happened after that toast, please like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from and what time is it? I'd love to hear from you. Now let me take you back to where this really began. Growing up in Westport, Connecticut, I learned early that my family measured people in a very specific currency, and it wasn't kindness. My father, Richard Cordero, was a managing partner at a commercial real estate firm. Old money adjacent. Country club membership. A man who introduced himself by mentioning his company within the first 30 seconds. My mother, Diane, hadn't worked since 1998, but served on 3 charity boards and organized galas with surgical precision. My older brother Graham was the golden child. Georgetown Law, married to the daughter of a federal judge, a junior partner at a white shoe firm by 29. And then there was me, the one who chose art history instead of finance, the one who moved to Brooklyn after college instead of back to Connecticut, the one who, in my father's words, had so much potential and just threw it away. When I was 17, I won a scholarship to a summer program at the Rhode Island School of Design. I was ecstatic. Dad glanced at the letter and said, "Art school, well, at least it's free." That same month, Graham got into Georgetown and they threw a dinner party for 40 people. Engraved invitations, a 3-course meal. Dad's toast that night. To Graham, carrying on the Cordero legacy. I told myself art wasn't something our family celebrated. That was fine. I framed the scholarship letter myself and packed it for college. Nobody noticed it was gone from the fridge. At 22, I graduated from NYU with honors, double major in art history and museum studies. I'd worked at the campus gallery, interned at the Met, and published a paper on post-war restoration ethics. My parents came to graduation. Dad spent most of the ceremony on his phone. When I found them afterward, he shook my hand, not a hug, a handshake, and said, "Good. Now what's the real plan?" Graham's law school graduation had been followed by a weekend in the Hamptons. Mine was followed by dinner at a chain restaurant near the venue, because Dad said he didn't know the area well enough to pick somewhere better. I told myself he was just tired from the drive. 3 years ago, I asked my parents for a small loan, $8,000, to help me put a deposit on my first apartment with Marcus. We'd been together 2 years. I was working as an assistant curator at a gallery in Chelsea, making $52,000 a year. Not wealthy, but stable. Responsible. Dad said no. "Natalie, I'm not subsidizing your lifestyle choices. If your boyfriend can't afford a deposit, that tells you something." 6 months later, he gifted Graham and his wife $120,000 for a down payment on a townhouse in Georgetown. The math never added up. It was never supposed to. I kept a mental ledger without meaning to. Over 9 years of adulthood, Graham received roughly $340,000 in direct financial support. Tuition, the townhouse, a car, his wedding fully funded at $95,000. I received my undergraduate tuition, partially offset by scholarships and nothing else. No help with rent, no help with loans, no wedding fund. When I asked about the disparity once, Dad said, "Graham is building something. You're finding yourself. I was 30 years old. I'd been working in the arts for 8 years. I'd helped acquire pieces now worth 6 figures. I was not finding myself. I was being dismissed. But all of that was just prelude to the rehearsal dinner. Marcus and I met at a coffee shop in Williamsburg 4 years ago. He was sitting in the corner with a laptop and 3 notebooks spread across the table, and he looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. I accidentally knocked his coffee over, reaching for a napkin. He looked up, smiled, and said, "That's the most exciting thing that's happened to me all week." We talked for 3 hours. He asked me about restoration ethics, about the artists I loved, about why I cried the first time I stood in front of a Rothko. He listened like what I said actually mattered. Not politely, genuinely. He was a software engineer, self-taught. Raised by a single mother in Trenton, New Jersey. No trust fund, no legacy, no country club. His mom, Angela, worked double shifts as a home health aide to keep them in a 2-bedroom apartment. Marcus got his first computer from a church donation drive when he was 12. By 16, he was building websites for local businesses at $200 a pop. He put himself through community college, transferred to Rutgers on a merit scholarship, and started a cybersecurity company out of his apartment with 2 friends and a maxed-out credit card. Everything he had, he'd built with his hands. My father looked at those hands and saw nothing. My father hated him from the first introduction. "So, Marcus, what does your father do?" "I don't have a relationship with my father, sir." "Ah, and your mother?" "She's a home health aide in New Jersey." I watched my father's face recalibrate in real time. Marcus went from unknown to categorized in under 10 seconds. Not our kind. That was the verdict. It never changed. Over the next 3 years, every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call included some version of the same message. Dad comparing Marcus to Graham's wife, Elise. Mom asking when Marcus was going to settle into something more stable. Graham casually mentioning his bonus in front of Marcus. The constant, quiet erosion of the man I loved. Marcus never complained. He'd drive home after Thanksgiving and say, "Your family is your family, Nat. I'm not going to ask you to choose." That patience was what killed me. He absorbed every slight with grace I didn't deserve to witness. When we got engaged, I called my parents. Mom said congratulations. Dad said, "Well, I hope he signed a prenup." Marcus didn't need a prenup. What my family didn't know, what Marcus didn't talk about because he wasn't that kind of person, was that his company, Cipher Vault, had been growing exponentially. They'd landed a Department of Defense contract 18 months before our engagement. Their annual revenue had crossed $12 million. They had 42 employees and 3 pending patents. Marcus drove a 7-year-old Honda. He wore the same 4 pairs of jeans in rotation. He brought a $30 bottle of wine to my parents' house, and my father looked at it like it was from a gas station. 2 weeks before the wedding, Cipher Vault was acquired by a major tech conglomerate. The deal? $40 million. Marcus's stake as co-founder and CEO, $18.5 million after taxes and partner splits. Page 3 of the Wall Street Journal. His photo. His name. Right there, Marcus told me the night the deal closed. We sat on our apartment floor eating takeout pad thai, and he said, "So that happened today." He showed me the paperwork. I stared at the numbers. Then I stared at him. "Are you going to tell my parents?" He shook his head. "Not before the wedding. This isn't about them. I don't need your father's respect because of a number. I wanted it because I love his daughter." That was the man my father called a downgrade. We agreed not to tell anyone until after the honeymoon. Let the wedding be about us, not about money, not about proving anything to anyone. And then Dad gave that toast. My daughter married down, 53 witnesses. My college friends. Marcus's mother, Angela, who had worked double shifts for 15 years to keep a roof over her son's head. Marcus's business partners. Our friends. And my father standing under crystal chandeliers in a rented suit he'd charged to his company card, calling the self-made millionaire sitting next to me a step down. Angela's face. That's what I'll never forget. She didn't cry. She just set her napkin on the table very carefully, like she was deciding whether to stay or leave. She stayed. For Marcus, but I saw her hands shaking. Marcus's business partner, Dev, leaned over and whispered, "Should I say something?" Marcus shook his head. "Not tonight." I spent my wedding morning with a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with nerves. My maid of honor, Priya, found me in the bridal suite staring out the window. "You're thinking about the toast," she said. "I'm thinking about how Marcus's mother had to sit there and hear that about her son." Priya sat down next to me. "Nat, your dad said what he said, but today isn't about him. Today is about you and the best man I've ever seen you with. Marcus didn't flinch last night because he knows who he is. Let that be enough for today." She was right, and Marcus proved it when he held my hands during our vows and said, "I would choose you in every version of this life." I looked at him and I knew, whatever came next, we'd handle it together. The wedding was beautiful, small, 80 guests at a restored barn in the Hudson Valley that Marcus found after visiting 11 venues on his lunch breaks. We paid for every cent ourselves, $34,000. Flowers, food, music, the photographer, all of it. My parents contributed nothing. Dad said weddings were the couple's responsibility now. Graham's wedding, all $95,000 of it, had been fully funded by our parents. The invitation suite alone cost $4,200. But I'd stopped expecting consistency a long time ago. We honeymooned in Portugal for 10 days. Lisbon, Porto, the Algarve coast. Marcus planned the whole thing as a surprise. We ate sardines on a terrace overlooking the Tagus River, and he said, "This is the life I wanted to build with you. Not the number. This." I believed him completely. When we came back, the Wall Street Journal article had been out for 3 weeks. Marcus's inbox had 2,400 unread emails. His LinkedIn had exploded. Forbes had reached out for an interview, and my father still didn't know. That changed on a Sunday in April. Marcus and I were making breakfast. He was flipping pancakes, I was cutting strawberries, when my phone rang. Mom called me, frantic. "Natalie, your Aunt Vivian just sent me a newspaper article. She saw it in her dentist's waiting room. Is this Marcus?" "Yes." $40 million? "Yes, Mom." Silence. A long one. I could hear her breathing change. "Why didn't you tell us?" "You never asked about his work, Mom. Not once in 4 years. You asked about his father, his mother's job, his car, his clothes, whether he owned or rented. You never once asked what he was building. Not a single time." More silence. "Your father is going to want to talk to you." "I'm sure he is." Dad called 40 minutes later. His voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Careful. Measured. Almost gentle, like he was auditioning for a version of himself he'd never tried. "Natalie, I just read about Marcus's company. That's very impressive." "It is. I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot with him. I'd love to have you both over for dinner, reconnect. Graham and Elise, too. A family thing." A family thing. 4 years of dismissal, one rehearsal dinner toast that humiliated the man I love in front of everyone we cared about, and now he wanted a family dinner. "Dad, do you remember what you said at our rehearsal dinner?" Pause. "I was making a joke, Natalie. It came out wrong." 53 people heard you say my husband was beneath me. His mother heard it. His business partners heard it. That wasn't a joke. That was what you actually believed." I was concerned. Any father would be. You weren't concerned. You were judging him by the only metric you've ever cared about. And you were wrong. Not because he turned out to be wealthy, but because he was always worthy. Money didn't make him worthy, Dad. He was worthy when he was sleeping 3 hours a night building his company. He was worthy when he drove his 7-year-old Honda to your house and brought a bottle of wine he'd researched for an hour because he wanted you to like him. He was worthy every single time you looked through him like he wasn't there. I could hear him breathing. He didn't have a response for that. And by the way, he knew about the acquisition 2 weeks before the rehearsal dinner. He sat at that table knowing he was worth more than everyone in that room combined, and he still said nothing. Because he didn't think money was something you used to humiliate people, unlike you. The line was silent for a long time. "Marcus and I will have dinner with you, but there are conditions. You will apologize to him directly. Not the kind where you say, "I'm sorry if you were offended." A real apology. You'll also apologize to Angela. You will not bring up money, net worth, or comparisons to Graham. And you will never, ever reduce another human being to their bank account in my presence again. He agreed. Quietly. The dinner happened 3 weeks later at my parents' house. The good china was out. Mom had made her signature beef Wellington, something she only made for people she was trying to impress. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad's apology was stiff, rehearsed, and about 60% sincere. He looked at Marcus across the table and said, "I owe you an apology. What I said at the rehearsal dinner was wrong. I judged you unfairly, and I'm sorry." Marcus nodded and said, "I appreciate that, Richard, thank you." No grudge, no lecture, just acceptance. Angela came too. Dad shook her hand and said, "Your son is a remarkable man, Angela. You raised him well." Angela looked at him with an expression I'll carry with me forever. Not anger, not smugness, just the quiet vindication of a woman who'd always known. She said, "I know. I've known that for 32 years. I didn't need a newspaper to tell me." That was the most satisfying moment of the entire ordeal. It's been 8 months now. Marcus and I bought a brownstone in Park Slope, not to prove anything, but because Marcus saw the garden and said, "Our kids could play here someday." He's advising 2 startups and teaching a cybersecurity course at Columbia as an adjunct. His students love him. I was promoted to lead curator at the gallery, overseeing a $2.3 million acquisition budget. We adopted a rescue dog named Pepper who sleeps on Marcus's feet every night and barks at the mailman like it's a personal vendetta. Marcus donated $500,000 to a STEM scholarship fund for first-generation college students. He named it after his mother, the Angela Torres Future Builders Fund. When Angela found out, she cried for 20 minutes and then said, "Marcus, I told you to save your money." He said, "Mom, this is saving my money. I'm investing it in people like us." My relationship with my parents is different now. Not warm exactly, but more honest than it's ever been. Dad doesn't make comments about Marcus anymore. He asks about the startups. He came to Marcus's Columbia lecture last month and sat in the back row without being asked. He's trying. It's clumsy and late, but he's trying. Graham called me after the article came out. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Would it have changed how you treated him?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I don't hold it against them the way I used to. People raised on status see the world through status. It's not an excuse, it's just an explanation. The important thing is that Marcus never needed their approval to know who he was. He knew. He always knew. Some nights I think about that rehearsal dinner. The champagne, the chandelier, my father's voice carrying across the room. "My daughter married down." 53 people shifting in their seats, Angela's hands trembling on her napkin. Marcus's jaw tight but his eyes steady, choosing silence not because he was weak, but because he had absolutely nothing to prove to a man who measured the world in dollar signs and last names. He didn't marry down. He married someone whose family couldn't see past their own reflection. And he loved me anyway. He loved me before the acquisition, during the humiliation, and after the truth came out. That consistency, that unshakable, quiet certainty, is worth more than every dollar in every account. If you're watching this and someone has made the person you love feel small, or if someone has made you feel like you're not enough because you don't fit their definition of success, I want you to hear this. Worth isn't inherited. It isn't printed on a business card or measured by a zip code. Worth is how you treat people when nobody's watching, and how you love someone when it costs you something. The right people will see it, even if your family doesn't. And that has to be enough. It was enough for us. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Have you ever had someone underestimate the person you love? What happened when the truth came out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, remember, you don't marry a resume, you marry a person. Choose the one who shows up when it matters. That's the only net worth that counts.